When the anxious stops chasing the avoidant, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. How many of you have ever felt like you're chasing someone who keeps running away? How many of you have been stuck in a cycle where you give, you love, you try harder, and yet it's never enough? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Listen to me. This stops today, not tomorrow, not next year, right now. When you chase someone, you're not just running toward them, you're running away from yourself. Chasing creates imbalance because it puts all the power in the hands of the person who is being pursued. Think about it. The moment you start running after someone, they no longer have to make an effort. They no longer have to show up. They don't have to invest because you're doing all the work for them. This creates a dangerous dynamic where one person is always in pursuit and the other is always pulling away. It's like a cat and mouse game, except the more you chase, the further they run. And this isn't because they don't care, it's because human psychology is wired this way. When something is readily available, we take it for granted. But when something is scarce, when it has value, we suddenly pay attention. Think about the last time you really wanted something, maybe a limited edition product, a rare opportunity, or an experience that wasn't easily accessible. You felt a strong pull toward it, right? The harder it was to get, the more valuable it seemed. This is the same principle that applies in relationships. When you overextend yourself, when you give too much too soon, when you chase, you make yourself overly available. And when someone feels like they don't have to work for your presence, they stop valuing it. Chasing also creates a dynamic of desperation. It sends an unspoken message, I need you more than you need me. And in relationships, perceived neediness can push people away. It creates an imbalance where one person is constantly proving their worth while the other simply exists, knowing they don't have to do anything to keep you around. This isn't love. This isn't connection. This is a one-sided game where one person is always at a disadvantage. Now let's talk about why the avoidant person pulls away when they're being chased. Avoidant attachment styles are often wired to feel overwhelmed by closeness. The moment they sense that someone is getting too close too fast, they instinctively create distance. This isn't necessarily a conscious decision. It's a deeply ingrained pattern. So when you chase them, it reinforces their fear of losing independence. Instead of bringing them closer, it actually makes them withdraw even more. What happens when you stop chasing? The power shifts. When you take a step back, when you stop proving yourself, when you start standing in your own worth, something interesting happens. The person who is running away suddenly starts to notice your absence. They start wondering where your energy went. The chase stops being fun when there's no one chasing anymore. This is where balance is restored. Love isn't about pursuit. It's about mutual investment. It's about both people choosing each other, not one person convincing the other to stay. When you stop chasing, you stop feeding the imbalance. You create space for someone to step up. And if they don't, then they were never truly available to begin with. This is why the anxious person must break the habit of chasing, because the more you chase, the more you confirm a belief that says, I have to work for love, and that belief is a lie. Real love isn't something you beg for. It's not something you have to constantly earn. It's something that flows naturally between two people who are equally invested in each other. But breaking this cycle requires awareness. It requires a shift in mindset. It means recognizing that your value isn't tied to how much you do for someone. It means understanding that pulling back isn't losing, it's actually gaining yourself. It means embracing the idea that the right person will never make you feel like you have to chase them in the first place. When you stop chasing, you send a different message to the world and to yourself. You communicate that you are worthy of love that is freely given. You show that you respect yourself enough to walk away from situations that leave you depleted, and you step into a place of confidence where you no longer seek validation from those who are unwilling to meet you halfway. The moment you break the cycle of chasing is the moment you start attracting something different, because true love isn't about running after someone who won't stop for you. It's about walking together side by side with someone who chooses you just as much as you choose them. When we talk about the cycle of an anxious person chasing an avoidant, we're not talking about love. We're talking about a pattern, a deeply ingrained subconscious pattern that has nothing to do with real connection and everything to do with old wounds playing out in relationship. It feels like love because it's intense. It feels like love because there's a deep emotional charge. But what it really is a cycle that keeps repeating itself, keeping you stuck in a loop where you constantly feel like you have to earn love, prove your worth, and fight for someone to stay. This cycle often starts in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where love felt inconsistent, where you had to work to be seen, where emotional support wasn't always available, or where affection was given conditionally, you may have learned that love is something you chase, that love is something you must work hard for, that love is not safe unless you're actively securing it. On the other side, the avoidant often grew up in a space where closeness felt overwhelming, where vulnerability felt unsafe, or where emotions were not properly acknowledged. As a result, when someone gets too close, their nervous system registers it as a threat, not because they don't care, but because deep intimacy feels foreign and uncomfortable to them. So what happens when these two attachment styles meet? A push and pull dynamic begins. The anxious person, driven by fear of abandonment, starts reaching, overgiving, and proving their worth. The avoidant, overwhelmed by emotional intensity, starts withdrawing, pulling back, and needing space. The anxious person then chases even harder, trying to close the gap, and in response, the avoidant person creates even more distance. And so the cycle repeats. Again and again. This is not love. This is an emotional pattern based on unhealed wounds. Real love is about safety. It's about security. It's about two people showing up for each other in a way that feels reciprocal. But when an anxious person chases an avoidant, the relationship is built on fear, not connection. The anxious person fears being left, so they do everything in their power to prevent that from happening. The avoidant person fears being consumed, so they do everything in their power to create space. Neither is truly acting out of love, they're acting out of survival. What makes this pattern so difficult to break is that it's often mistaken for passion. The highs and lows, the emotional roller coaster, the relief when they finally come back, it all creates a sense of intensity that feels intoxicating. But love isn't supposed to be an addiction. It's not supposed to feel like a constant state of anxiety. It's not supposed to leave you feeling depleted, questioning your worth, and wondering what you did wrong. The only way to step out of this pattern is to recognize it for what it is. You are not chasing love. You are chasing a familiar wound. And the person pulling away from you isn't rejecting you. They are simply responding in the way they've been wired to respond. The key to breaking this cycle isn't to chase harder, and it's not to try to make the avoidant change. It's to heal the part of you that believes you have to chase at all. Love is not a game of pursuit. It is a mutual choice. It is a connection that flows naturally, not one that has to be forced or fought for. The moment you recognize that this pattern isn't about love, but about attachment wounds playing out, you gain the power to step out of it. You gain the ability to choose relationships that feel secure, that feel reciprocal, that don't leave you constantly questioning your place in someone's life. This is how you break free. Not by getting the avoidant to stay, not by convincing them to come closer, but by realizing that love isn't something you have to chase, it's something you deserve to receive without fear, without anxiety, and without the need to prove your worth. Fear is at the core of anxious attachment. It doesn't just show up in relationships. It lives in the mind, in the body, in the nervous system. It's the fear of being left, the fear of not being enough, the fear that at any moment love will slip through your fingers. It creates a constant state of hypervigilance, making every text, every silence, every shift in energy feel like a potential threat. This fear isn't random. It's wired into the brain through past experiences, often starting in early childhood. If love was inconsistent, if emotional needs weren't always met, or if caregivers were unpredictable, the nervous system learned that love is something to be monitored, controlled, and chased. Love became something uncertain, and when something feels uncertain, the mind looks for ways to secure it. This is why anxious attachment manifests as overthinking, people-pleasing, and the constant need for reassurance. It's why every unanswered text feels like rejection. It's why distance from a partner feels unbearable. It's why the smallest changes in behavior create spirals of doubt and insecurity. The anxious mind isn't just reacting to the present moment, it's reacting to every past moment where love felt unstable. The problem is when fear drives attachment, it doesn't lead to closeness, it leads to exhaustion. It creates cycles of overgiving where one person pours everything into the relationship hoping to feel safe while the other person starts to feel overwhelmed. The more the anxious person gives, the more they hope to secure love. But love is not something that can be secured through effort alone. Real love is not about proving, performing, or constantly adjusting to keep someone close. This is why anxious attachment often attracts avoidant partners. The fear-driven need for connection meets the fear-driven need for space, and both people reinforce each other's deepest wounds. The anxious person reaches trying to close the gap, believing that if they just love harder, stay longer, or do more, the avoidant will finally stay. But the avoidant pulls back, needing space to feel safe. confirming the anxious person's deepest fear that love is fragile, unpredictable, and always at risk of being taken away. The truth is, no amount of chasing will ever heal this fear, because the fear is not in the other person, it's inside. It's in the nervous system, in the subconscious mind, in the belief that love must be earned. And as long as love is something that feels conditional, something that requires effort to hold on to, it will never feel truly secure. Healing starts when the anxious person stops seeking safety outside of themselves. When they stop looking for proof that they are loved and start building a foundation of self-worth that isn't dependent on anyone else. When they recognize that love should not feel like a test, a battle, or a constant game of trying to do enough. Love should feel safe. It should feel reciprocal. It should not leave you in a constant state of questioning your value. But that kind of love only becomes possible when you break free from the fear that tells you love is something you have to fight for. This fear-driven attachment pattern isn't a life sentence. It's a learned response, and anything that is learned can be unlearned. It starts with awareness. It starts with recognizing when fear is taking control, when anxiety is dictating behavior, when the impulse to chase is really an impulse to soothe an old wound. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop allowing fear to run your relationships, everything changes. You start choosing partners who don't trigger your worst fears. You start showing up in relationships from a place of confidence, not desperation. You start experiencing love as something steady and fulfilling, not something that leaves you feeling drained and uncertain. This is what true healing looks like, not controlling love, not securing it, but knowing that you are worthy of it without having to prove anything at all. Your power is in stillness, not in running, not in chasing, not in trying to prove your worth to someone who keeps pulling away. The moment you stop moving toward them, the moment you stop overextending, you reclaim all the energy you've been pouring into something that was never meant to be one-sided. For so long, the anxious person believes that movement equals progress, that if they just try harder, give more, love louder, they can close the emotional distance. But what they don't realize is that chasing doesn't bring closeness, it reinforces distance. Because the more you chase, the more the other person feels the need to retreat. The more you pursue, the more they confirm the belief that they must maintain space to feel safe. Stillness, on the other hand, does something powerful. It shifts the energy. It changes the dynamic. It forces a new reality where you are no longer the one doing all the work, where you are no longer the one fighting to keep something alive that should be growing naturally. Stillness is not passivity. It's not about waiting around for someone to realize your worth. It's about choosing yourself. It's about recognizing that love, real love, does not require you to beg. It does not require you to compromise your self-respect just to be chosen. When you stop chasing, you don't lose, you gain. You gain clarity, you gain peace, you gain the ability to see things as they really are instead of how you desperately want them to be. In stillness, you realize that love is not about proving yourself. It is not about being more accommodating, more understanding, or more available just to make someone stay. Love is about mutual effort. It's about both people showing up equally. And if you are the only one putting in that effort, then what you have is not love. It's an emotional imbalance that will only leave you feeling empty. Stillness forces the avoidant to face themselves. When you stop chasing, when you remove your energy from the equation, something interesting happens. The person who was used to you always being there, always reaching, always filling the space, suddenly feels the void. They feel the absence of your effort. And this is when the truth is revealed. If they truly care, if they are capable of connection, they will step forward. But if they don't, then you have your answer. This is where true power lies, in being able to stand still and trust that what is meant for you will meet you halfway, in refusing to settle for anything that requires you to sacrifice your self-worth, in knowing that if someone wants to be in your life, they will make the effort to be there. Stillness also teaches you something profound, that love should feel secure, that you should not have to constantly fight for someone's attention, affection, or commitment, that the right person will not make you question where you stand. This shift in energy is everything. When you stop chasing, you redirect all the energy you were pouring into someone else back into yourself. You start focusing on your own healing, your own growth, your own happiness. You start becoming someone who no longer needs to chase because you know your worth. And when you reach this place, the type of people you attract changes. You are no longer drawn to those who need to be convinced to love you. You are drawn to those who choose you freely. But to get there, you must be willing to sit in the discomfort of stillness. You must be willing to resist the urge to reach out, to fix, to control. You must be willing to face the fear that says if you stop chasing, they will leave. Because if they do, that means they were never truly present to begin with. When you stand still, you don't just regain your power, you shift the entire game. You no longer operate from fear. You no longer settle for one-sided love. You become someone who is grounded, secure, and unwilling to accept anything less than what they truly deserve. And that is where everything changes. Attachment wounds run deep. They don't just affect relationships. They shape the way you see yourself, the way you experience love, and the way you respond to emotional triggers. When an anxious person chases an avoidant, they aren't just reacting to the present moment. They are reliving old wounds, replaying an emotional script that was written long before this relationship even began. At the root of anxious attachment is a belief. I am not enough as I am. This belief was not born in adulthood. It developed in childhood in moments when love felt inconsistent, unpredictable, or conditional. Maybe it was a parent who was emotionally unavailable, who only gave affection when you performed well or behaved a certain way. Maybe it was a caregiver who was physically present but emotionally distant, leaving you constantly guessing how to win their love. The brain takes these early experiences and creates a blueprint. It learns that love is something that must be secured, something that must be worked for. And so, as an adult, when someone starts to pull away, it doesn't just feel like a small moment of distance. It feels like abandonment. It feels like rejection. It feels like proof that the old wound was right all along. I have to do more to be loved. But healing begins the moment you recognize that this pattern is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of your wounds. You were never unworthy of love. You were never supposed to chase affection. You were never meant to spend your life proving your value to people who cannot see it. These are simply old survival strategies that no longer serve you. Breaking this cycle requires something powerful, reparenting yourself. It means learning to give yourself the love, security, and reassurance that you once looked for in others. It means recognizing when the need to chase is actually a wounded inner child looking for safety. It means pausing in those moments of panic, of overthinking, of wanting to reach out and ask, what do I really need right now? Because the truth is, when you chase, it's not just about the person pulling away. It's about you trying to soothe a deep-rooted fear, a fear of being left, a fear of not being chosen, a fear of being alone. But no one outside of you can ever fully heal this fear. No amount of reassurance from another person will ever be enough if you don't first learn to give it to yourself. This is where self-healing becomes essential. Healing anxious attachment is not about forcing yourself to act like you don't care. It's not about playing games or pretending to be detached. It's about building real, lasting security within yourself. It's about knowing that you are whole, that you are worthy, and that love should not feel like a constant fight. And the way forward is through self-awareness, noticing the moments when fear takes over, recognizing when your nervous system is triggered, understanding that the impulse to chase is not about love, it's about survival. And then in those moments, choosing differently, choosing to soothe yourself instead of seeking external validation, choosing to remind yourself that your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to stay, choosing to walk away from love that makes you feel small, anxious, and unseen. Healing also means stepping into relationships with new standards. It means no longer tolerating emotional unavailability. It means recognizing that you deserve consistency, effort, and reciprocity. It means being able to say, I will not chase because love should not require me to run after it. This shift changes everything because when you heal, the way you attract love changes. You stop being drawn to those who make you feel unworthy. You stop mistaking anxiety for chemistry. You stop settling for connections that leave you feeling insecure. Instead, you begin to choose differently. You begin to gravitate toward relationships that feel safe, stable, and mutual. Healing takes time, but every step away from chasing is a step toward true self-worth. It's a step toward breaking generational patterns. It's a step toward a love that does not require you to sacrifice your peace. And when you reach this place, you'll realize something powerful. Love was never meant to be earned. It was always meant to be received freely by someone who chooses you fully, without hesitation, without conditions, and without the need for you to chase. When you stop chasing, everything shifts. The energy you once poured into proving your worth, into trying to make someone stay, into anxiously analyzing every little change in behavior, all of that energy comes back to you. And in that space, something powerful happens. You realize that love was never meant to be about convincing someone to choose you. It was never supposed to feel like a battle for attention, for affection, for emotional security. Real love is reciprocal, effortless in its commitment, and deeply rooted in mutual respect. For the anxious person, the act of chasing feels natural. It feels like a necessary part of maintaining the relationship. But the reality is the more you chase, the more you reinforce the belief that you must earn love, that you must prove your value, that your worth is dependent on whether or not someone stays. This belief is not only exhausting, it's completely untrue. Love, real love, does not require you to sacrifice your self-respect just to keep it alive. The moment you step back, you see things for what they really are. You see whether the other person is willing to meet you halfway. You see whether the relationship is truly built on mutual effort or if it only existed because you were the one constantly holding it together. This is a difficult but necessary truth to face. Because if someone only stays when you are the one doing all the work, then they were never truly there to begin with. Stillness creates clarity. When you are no longer consumed by the cycle of chasing, you can finally hear your own needs. You can finally see your own patterns. You can finally recognize that love is not supposed to feel like this constant state of anxiety and uncertainty. You begin to understand that a relationship should not drain you. It should not make you feel like you have to fight for every moment of attention, every display of affection, every small sign that you matter. This is where the transformation happens. When you stop chasing, you shift from fear to self-trust. You begin to believe that if someone is meant to be in your life, they will be there, not because you forced it, but because they want to be. You start to see that distance is not always a loss. It is often protection. Protection from a connection that was built on insecurity rather than genuine compatibility. One of the biggest fears of the anxious person is that if they stop chasing, they will lose the person they love. But the truth is, you cannot lose what is truly meant for you. A connection that is real, that is stable, that is built on mutual care and respect, does not disappear just because you stop proving yourself. If someone chooses to walk away the moment you stop chasing, then you have your answer. That relationship was never built on solid ground. The process of stepping back also forces the avoidant partner to face themselves. When you remove your energy, when you stop overextending, when you refuse to be the only one keeping the relationship alive, it creates space for them to take responsibility. It forces them to either step forward and meet you at your level or to fade away. Either way, you win. Because if they step up, it means the relationship has a chance to grow in a healthy way. But if they don't, you are freed from a situation that was never truly serving you. Healing is not about becoming indifferent or cold. It is about learning to hold your own emotional boundaries. It is about recognizing that love should never make you feel like you are constantly auditioning for a role in someone's life. It is about stepping into your own power and knowing that your presence is a gift, not something to be taken for granted. This shift changes everything, because when you stop chasing, you begin attracting differently. You begin to gravitate toward people who are emotionally available, who meet you with the same level of effort and care that you bring to the table. You begin to see that love is not supposed to be about survival. It is supposed to feel safe, stable, and fulfilling. It takes courage to break this cycle. It takes strength to sit with the discomfort of stillness, to resist the urge to reach out, to fix, to control. But in that stillness, you find your true power. You realize that you are worthy of a love that does not require you to shrink yourself, to compromise your needs, to chase after someone who is never truly present. And when you finally step into that power, you will never settle for anything less again. True healing begins when you stop making excuses for inconsistent love. It happens the moment you decide that emotional unavailability is no longer something you are willing to tolerate. When you are anxiously attached, you have spent so much of your life trying to justify why someone pulls away, why they don't meet you in the way you meet them, why they struggle to give you the emotional security you crave. But the reality is, love should not feel like a guessing game. It should not leave you feeling like you have to decode every action, every silence, every shift in their behavior. For so long, you have convinced yourself that if you just try a little harder, if you are more patient, if you can just prove your worth, they will finally show up for you. But that belief is a trap. It keeps you in a cycle of chasing people who are incapable of giving you what you need. It keeps you stuck in relationships where you are constantly seeking reassurance, constantly wondering where you stand, constantly bending over backward just to receive the bare minimum. Healing starts when you stop making excuses for emotional distance. It starts when you stop believing that their inability to connect is something you can fix. You cannot heal someone else's avoidance by overcompensating. You cannot force someone to love you in the way you need to be loved. Their emotional walls, their fear of closeness, their inability to be present, these are their issues to resolve, not your burdens to carry. You have been conditioned to think that if someone pulls away, it must mean you did something wrong, that their inconsistency is a reflection of your worth, that if you were just more lovable, more secure, more enough, they wouldn't keep running. But that is a lie. Their emotional unavailability has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own fears, their own wounds, their own unresolved patterns. The moment you stop making excuses for avoidant behavior, you reclaim your power. You stop trying to make someone love you in a way they are not capable of loving. You stop chasing after validation from people who don't even know how to validate themselves. You stop accepting breadcrumbs when you deserve the whole loaf. This shift is not easy. It requires you to sit with discomfort. It requires you to break the old belief that love must be earned, that it is something you have to work for. It requires you to stop seeking validation outside of yourself and instead turn inward to realize that you are already enough with or without someone else's affection. When you stop making excuses, you see things clearly. You see the emotional patterns that have been playing out for years, keeping you stuck in relationships that only drain you. You see the ways you have settled for less than you deserve, hoping that one day they would finally change. But the truth is, people don't change because you love them harder. They change because they choose to do the work on themselves. And if they are not choosing that, then nothing you do will ever be enough to make them stay. This is where real growth happens. You start setting boundaries not as a test to see if they care, but as a declaration of your own self-respect. You stop romanticizing inconsistency, stop mistaking emotional distance for mystery, stop believing that you have to prove yourself just to be worthy of love. You start recognizing that love should feel safe, that it should be mutual, that it should never leave you questioning your worth. When you stop making excuses, you open the door to real love, the kind of love that doesn't leave you feeling anxious and uncertain, the kind that doesn't make you feel like you have to chase, the kind that meets you with the same energy, effort, and commitment that you bring. This is what healing looks like. It's not about shutting down emotionally or becoming avoidant yourself. It's about learning to stop settling for relationships that do not align with your self-worth. It's about trusting that if someone cannot meet you in the way you need, then they are not the right person for you. You do not have to fight for love. You do not have to make excuses for why someone cannot show up fully. You do not have to shrink yourself just to be chosen. The moment you accept this truth, the moment you finally stop making excuses, is the moment everything changes. Because now you are no longer searching for love in places that can't give it to you. Now you are finally choosing yourself. Letting go of the chase is not about giving up on love. It's about choosing the kind of love that chooses you back. It's about stepping into a new way of being where you no longer operate from fear, where you no longer tolerate inconsistency, where you no longer settle for anything that makes you feel unworthy. When you finally stop chasing, you begin attracting differently, not because you are playing games or trying to manipulate outcomes, but because your energy shifts. You no longer seek validation from people who are incapable of giving it. You no longer look to relationships to fill a void within you. Instead, you stand firmly in your worth, knowing that real love does not require you to prove anything. For so long, the anxious attachment pattern has taught you that love is something to secure, something to fight for, something that must be maintained through constant effort. You've believed that if you don't chase, love will slip away, that if you don't hold on tightly, people will leave, that if you don't do enough, you won't be enough. But the truth is, the kind of love that requires you to exhaust yourself just to keep it alive was never real love to begin with. It was a pattern. It was a wound-seeking validation. It was fear disguised as devotion. When you stop chasing, you give yourself the space to receive. You begin to attract people who are emotionally available, who do not need to be convinced to stay, who show up with the same level of presence and commitment that you bring to the table. You start to see that love is not about convincing someone to choose you. It's about aligning with people who already do. This shift is not just about relationships. It's about self-transformation. It's about becoming a person who no longer feels the need to overextend just to feel worthy. It's about unlearning the belief that you must work for love and instead stepping into the knowing that love, real love, flows naturally between two people who are both emotionally open and ready. Letting go of the chase means learning to sit with discomfort. It means resisting the urge to reach out when someone pulls away. It means understanding that your impulse to fix, to mend, to hold things together is not love. It's a survival mechanism born out of past wounds. And the moment you recognize this, the moment you decide that you no longer need to prove your worth, you begin to break free. At first, this new energy may feel unfamiliar. You may find yourself questioning whether you are doing the right thing. After all, you have spent so much of your life believing that effort equals love, that the more you give, the more valuable you are. But with time, you will start to see that when you stop chasing, the right people stay effortlessly. The right people meet you in the middle. The right people do not make you feel like you are too much or not enough. They make you feel safe. This is what it means to attract differently. It means embodying self-worth in a way that naturally filters out anyone who is not emotionally available. It means no longer settling for one-sided connections. It means raising your standards and trusting that the people who are truly meant for you will not require you to chase, to convince, or to beg for their love. When you operate from this new place of confidence and security, everything changes. Your energy is no longer rooted in fear, but in abundance. You start to see that love is not something you have to earn. It is something that flows freely when both people are emotionally ready and willing to meet each other with openness and consistency. You are no longer drawn to partners who make you feel anxious, uncertain, or unworthy. Instead, you find yourself gravitating toward those who bring peace, stability, and emotional presence. The cycle of chasing and withdrawing is replaced with a dynamic of mutual care and respect. And for the first time, love feels easy, not because you are doing less, but because you are no longer trying to force something that was never meant to be forced. This is the power of stepping back. This is the power of trusting that love will find you when you stop running toward it and instead stand firm in your own self-worth. When you finally let go of the chase, you open the door to a love that does not require you to exhaust yourself, to shrink yourself, or to prove yourself. You open the door to a love that is real, reciprocal, and deeply fulfilling. Here's the conclusion and thank you note to wrap up the speech. When you stop chasing, you step into your power. You shift from fear to trust, from scarcity to abundance, from insecurity to deep self-worth. You no longer tolerate love that feels like a battle, nor do you waste your energy trying to convince someone to see your value. Instead, you stand firmly in the knowing that you are worthy of a love that is given freely, not one that requires you to prove yourself over and over again. This journey is not about becoming detached or indifferent. It's about becoming whole within yourself. It's about recognizing that real love does not leave you questioning your worth. It's about choosing relationships that add to your life, not ones that drain you. When you stop chasing, you stop settling. You stop making excuses for emotional distance. You stop mistaking inconsistency for passion. And in doing so, you make space for the love you truly deserve, the kind of love that meets you where you are with the same effort, the same presence, the same depth of commitment. This shift is life-changing because when you step out of the cycle of chasing, you reclaim your peace. You become the kind of person who attracts love effortlessly, not because you are playing a game, but because you know that the right person will never require you to run after them. You begin to trust that love, when it is true, will always meet you halfway. And when you finally embrace this truth, you will never again settle for anything less. Thank you for being here today, for listening, for showing up for yourself. This journey of healing and growth is not easy, but it is worth it. The fact that you are here means you are ready for something greater, ready to break free from the old patterns, ready to create a new, healthier version of love, and most importantly, ready to choose yourself. Never forget that you are worthy of deep, secure, and fulfilling love. And the moment you start believing that, everything changes.